What if the strongest smile in the world was hiding a silent collapse? What if, behind palace walls and public appearances, a battle was unfolding that no one was prepared to face? This is not the story you think you know. This is a story of quiet warning signs ignored, of a single night that changed everything, and of a family forced to confront the unthinkable. From a sudden collapse that sent shockwaves through the palace, to tense hours where the future hung by a thread, and a nation holding its breath in silence, what happened next would redefine strength, love, and survival. Stay with us, because what lies ahead is not just about crisis, it's about what comes after. A public smile, a private fracture. On October 9th, beneath the vaulted arches of London's Natural History Museum, the world saw composure perfected. Chandeliers glimmered above the polished marble floors as global leaders, scientists, and dignitaries gathered ahead of the upcoming UN Climate Summit. Cameras flashed relentlessly as King Charles and Prince William arrived side by side, their expressions measured, their posture regal. To the public eye, it was business as usual, duty before all else. But something was wrong. Those closest to them felt it instantly. The smiles did not quite reach their eyes. William's jaw was set too tightly, his hand clenching and unclenching at his side. When the questions came, routine inquiries about environmental initiatives and diplomatic cooperation, both men responded with practiced restraint. Then came the statement, short, controlled, carefully chosen. Princess Catherine's recovery, they said, required more time, more care. King Charles added a single sentence that sent a quiet shiver through the press corps. We ask for understanding in this difficult moment. Difficult moment. Reporters exchanged glances. Pens hesitated. Phones buzzed. That phrase carried weight. Too much weight for a simple recovery delay. It hinted at uncertainty, at fear buried beneath protocol. The palace had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. Something private had crossed the threshold into public consequence. Behind closed doors, away from cameras and ceremony, the truth was unraveling. The woman the nation adored, the princess whose warmth had become synonymous with stability, was not simply resting. She was fighting something unseen, something relentless. As the evening ended and the guests departed under autumn skies, speculation ignited across the city. London felt it in the air, that electric tension that comes before history changes course. The monarchy had faced crises before, but this felt different. This felt personal. And at the center of it all, unseen and unheard, Catherine was already slipping further away from the life she once moved through with such effortless grace. The quiet erosion of strength. Long before the world sensed anything amiss, Catherine had known, not in a single dramatic moment, but in fragments, small betrayals of her body that crept in unnoticed. Fatigue arrived first, subtle and insidious. Mornings that once welcomed her with clarity and purpose now demanded effort. Getting out of bed felt like lifting invisible weights, her limbs heavy, uncooperative. She told herself it was stress, too many engagements, too little rest. But exhaustion soon became something else entirely. Dressing took concentration. Standing before her wardrobe, she would forget why she was there, her thoughts sluggish, tangled like threads soaked in syrup. Decisions that once took seconds, heels or flats, blue or cream, felt overwhelming. Time slipped strangely, minutes disappearing without memory. Then came the tremor. At first it was barely noticeable, a slight shake in her hand as she lifted a teacup, dismissed with a quiet smile and a joke about caffeine. But the tremor grew bolder. She dropped her phone. Ink wavered beneath her signature. She began wearing long sleeves, clasping her hands together and hiding them in pockets during public appearances. Fear settled deep in her chest, not of pain, but of being seen. The worst moments were the absences. sitting with her children, listening, or so she thought, as they chattered about school and stories, she would suddenly realize she had missed entire conversations. Her youngest tugged at her sleeve, worry creeping into his voice. "Mommy?" The guilt cut sharper than any symptom. Catherine became skilled at pretending. Smiles sharpened, laughter arrived on cue. When the children were near, she summoned the strength she didn't possess, letting their joy carry her for precious moments. But when they left, the mask collapsed. She would sink into chairs, trembling with exhaustion, staring into nothingness. She told no one the truth, because naming the fear would make it real. And Catherine, Princess of Wales, had always been the strong one. A palace that begins to notice. Royal households are trained to observe without intruding. Still, even discretion has limits. Slowly, quietly, the palace began to notice Catherine's decline. A footman delivering breakfast noted how little food was touched, and plates were returned almost full. Her lady-in-waiting saw the shadows beneath her eyes, dark crescents no powder could disguise. The housekeeper once found her sitting alone in a dim room, curtains drawn, too exhausted to reach the lamp just a few steps away. Whispers followed, not gossip, but worry. "She's thinner," someone murmured behind a closed door. "She needed help standing," another admitted. "She doesn't look well." Yet no one dared confront her directly. Catherine deflected concern with grace honed over the years. "Just tired, a little lingering cold, nothing to worry about." She changed the subjects effortlessly, turning attention outward as she always had, protecting others from her suffering. The palace doctor requested routine check-ins. She postponed them. Appearances were shortened, engagements quietly reshuffled. Publicly, everything remained seamless. Privately, Catherine was unraveling. Nights were the worst. Sleep eluded her, broken by strange sensations, heartbeats racing, then slowing unnaturally, breath shallow and uneven. Sometimes she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of the palace and wondering, for the first time in her life, if her body was betraying her. She never told William how frightened she was, not because she didn't trust him, but because she knew his love too well. She could not bear to put that fear in his eyes. Instead, she carried it alone, wrapping it in smiles and silence. By the time the palace truly understood something was terribly wrong, Catherine was already standing at the edge of a precipice she could no longer see. The night everything breaks. The night began like any other, deceptively ordinary. Dinner passed with polite conversation and careful laughter. Catherine kissed her children goodnight, lingering longer than usual, memorizing the weight of them in her arms, their warmth, their scent, their whispered "I love yous." Then she was alone. In her private sitting room, the pretense finally ended. The world tilted without warning. The room spun violently, walls blurring as nausea surged through her. She tried to stand, to reach the bell pull, to call for help, but her legs failed her completely. She collapsed. Pain shot through her knees as they struck the floor, but she barely felt it. Her body refused commands. Vision doubled, then dimmed. Breathing became labored, each inhale a conscious effort. Her heart raced wildly, then slowed in terrifying pauses that made her wonder if it would stop altogether. Minutes stretched endlessly. The room felt cold, though she couldn't tell if that chill came from the marble floor or from something inside her shutting down. She lay there, helpless, praying someone would come. When she was finally found, the palace erupted in controlled chaos. Hands lifted her gently. A blanket was draped over her trembling form. The doctor arrived, his expression tightening with each vital sign he checked. Silence followed, heavy, dreadful. This was no fainting spell, no exhaustion. This was something far more serious. As Catherine drifted in and out of awareness, she heard voices sharpen with urgency. Someone mentioned calling her husband. The word collapse echoed in her fading thoughts, and somewhere deep inside her, beneath the fear and confusion, one truth surfaced with terrifying clarity. She had waited too long. The call that shatters routine. Prince William had been sitting through another meeting filled with schedules, briefing papers, and carefully worded discussions that suddenly felt hollow. He listened, nodded, and spoke when required, but his mind drifted restlessly, an unease gnawing at him that he could not explain. When his private secretary appeared in the doorway, her face pale and strained, the room seemed to tilt before she spoke a single word. Conversations halted. Every instinct in William's body went rigid. She leaned down and whispered urgently, her voice low but trembling. Catherine had collapsed. Doctors were with her. He needed to come immediately. William stood so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly across the floor. Apologies fell from his lips without thought as he moved for the door, his heart hammering violently in his chest. He barely registered the concerned faces around him, barely heard the murmurs of respect and alarm. His hands shook as he shoved them into his pockets, desperate to hide the tremor. The drive back felt endless. Traffic lights lingered cruelly. Every delay felt intentional, torturous. He stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly it ached, bargaining silently with the universe, promising anything and everything if she would just be all right. He tried to pray, but found the words slipping away, replaced by raw fear. When the car finally stopped, he took the stairs two at a time, ignoring staff who tried to brief him, his entire world narrowing to a single truth. Catherine needed him, and he had never felt so powerless. A husband at the edge of fear. William burst into their private quarters and stopped short. Catherine lay on the bed, impossibly small against white linens, her face drained of color, dark shadows beneath her eyes. Medical equipment surrounded her, wires and monitors forming a barrier that made his chest constrict painfully. The doctor stood nearby, speaking quietly with a nurse, and turned as William entered. "How is she?" William asked, with his voice rough with barely restrained panic. The doctor hesitated, and that hesitation told him everything. William crossed the room and sank into the chair beside her, reaching for her hand. It felt cold and limp, so unlike the warm strength he knew. He pressed it to his cheek, eyes burning. "I'm here," he whispered. "I've got you." The doctor spoke in measured tones behind him, words like critical condition, multiple system failure, uncertain prognosis drifting through his mind like blows he could not fully absorb. William nodded mechanically, trying to appear composed, trying to be the man the crown demanded. Inside, he was breaking. Catherine stirred faintly, her fingers twitching in his grasp. Her lips moved. "Will?" she breathed weakly. His heart shattered and surged all at once. "I'm here, darling," he said, voice cracking openly now. She slipped back into unconsciousness, leaving him staring at her fragile breathing, terrified of every pause, every shallow rise of her chest, knowing the next 24 hours would decide everything. Decisions no one wants to make. William refused to leave Catherine's side, waving away food, rest, and reason. Time blurred into meaningless fragments, broken only by the beeping of machines and the quiet urgency of medical staff. Reality eventually intruded. Advisors gathered. His father called repeatedly. Questions pressed in about the children, the press, and the inevitable storm outside the palace walls. When William finally stepped into the adjoining room, voices erupted at once, discussing statements and strategies. He silenced them with a raised hand. "Nothing," he said sharply. "We say nothing." Advisors exchanged uneasy looks, warning that rumors were already spreading. William heard sudden urgency from the bedroom beyond, alarms and hurried footsteps, and his entire body locked with fear. "Figure it out," he snapped, already turning back. Catherine was stabilized, the doctor assured him, but the relief was fragile, temporary. When Charles arrived, his face drawn with worry, the weight of the moment deepened. Doctors spoke quietly but firmly. Catherine's condition was worsening. Without a miracle, end-of-life care would need to be discussed. William pressed his forehead to the glass, his shoulders shaking as silent sobs overtook him. Charles stood helplessly nearby, every ounce of authority useless against the reality unfolding. They were told the truth gently but unmistakably. Her strength was failing. Time was running out, and the world would soon need to know. A nation holds its breath. The statement was drafted and redrafted, every word heavy with consequence. William stared at the page, unable to finish sentences that acknowledged what they were all afraid to say. Charles placed a steady hand on his son's arm, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "We tell the truth as gently as we can," he said. When the decision was finally made, silence settled over the room like a final breath before a plunge. At precisely 3 o'clock, the announcement went live. Phones buzzed instantly. Headlines erupted. Buckingham Palace confirmed that Princess Catherine had suffered a serious medical setback and required urgent intensive care. Across the country, people stopped in the streets, offices, and homes, hands flying to their mouths in disbelief. Flags lowered. Churches opened their doors. Strangers gathered in quiet solidarity, united by fear and hope. Outside the hospital, crowds formed despite pleas for privacy, flowers appearing against iron gates within minutes. William watched it all distantly, numb to everything except the monitor beside Catherine's bed. Stable, they said, for now. He knew what that meant. Not better, just suspended between life and death. As night fell, he returned to the hospital corridor, pacing endlessly, listening to alarms rise and fall, bracing himself each time the door opened. Dawn crept in gray and cold when the doctor finally emerged with an unexpected look in his eyes. "There's been a development," he said quietly, and William prepared himself to learn whether hope still had a place in their story. The longest night. Night settled heavily over the hospital, thick with antiseptic air and unspoken dread. William paced the corridor outside Catherine's room, his footsteps tracing the same worn path again and again until it felt carved into the floor itself. Inside, machines hummed and beeped with mechanical indifference, their rhythm now the measure of his entire existence. Nurses moved in and out with quiet urgency, offering reassurances they could not guarantee. Every alarm made his heart lurch violently, every sudden hush terrifying in its own way. Time stretched unbearably, minutes dissolving into hours that seemed determined to test the limits of human endurance. William pressed his hands against the cool wall, forcing himself to breathe, to remain upright, to stay present. He thought of the children asleep back at the palace, unaware of how close their world stood to shattering. He thought of Catherine's laugh, the way it softened tense rooms, the way she always steadied him without trying. Now, she lay behind that door, suspended in a fragile balance that no crown or title could protect. Doctors spoke in low voices nearby, discussing numbers and readings that felt cruelly abstract. William caught fragments: blood pressure fluctuations, oxygen saturation, cardiac instability. and hated how clinical language reduced the woman he loved to measurements on a screen. At some point near dawn, exhaustion finally pressed him into a chair. He stared at the closed door, bargaining silently with fate, promising devotion, humility, anything at all. When the sky outside lightened from black to gray, he realized he had survived the night without sleeping, without leaving, without breaking completely. Whether Catherine would do the same remained heartbreakingly uncertain. A king confronts helplessness. King Charles arrived quietly in the early hours, his presence carrying a gravity that stilled the corridor. The years seemed to weigh heavier on him than ever, lines etched deeper by fear he could not voice aloud. He embraced William without ceremony, holding his son longer than protocol ever allowed. For a moment, neither spoke. Words felt useless against the enormity of what loomed. When the doctors gathered them for an update, Charles listened intently, his expression controlled even as the news chipped away at his composure. Catherine's organs were struggling. The infection remained aggressive. Intervention options were narrowing. Charles asked precise questions, his tone calm, his mind searching desperately for solutions. Could specialists be flown in? Experimental treatments authorized? Resources redirected? The answers came gently but firmly. Everything medically possible was already being done. For the first time since becoming king, Charles felt utterly powerless. Titles, authority, history, none of it mattered here. He watched William absorb the information with hollow eyes, saw his son retreat inward under the weight of responsibility and grief. Charles thought of Catherine not as a public figure, but as the young woman who had brought warmth into a family long starved of it, who had loved his son fiercely and raised his grandchildren with tenderness and grace. He thought of his own fragile health, of warnings he had ignored, and felt the cruel irony sting sharply. As they left the meeting, Charles placed a steadying hand on William's shoulder. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "you will not face it alone." The promise was small, but it was all he could give. Words released into the world. Back at the palace, the atmosphere was hushed and reverent, as though the walls themselves understood the gravity of what was unfolding elsewhere. Communications staff worked with subdued efficiency, crafting statements no one wanted to finalize. William and Charles reviewed each draft together, every sentence scrutinized for honesty without cruelty, transparency without spectacle. William struggled to read the words aloud. Each phrase acknowledging Catherine's condition felt like surrender. He paused repeatedly, hands pressed to the table, fighting the urge to tear the document apart. "This makes it real," he said hoarsely. Charles nodded, his own resolve wavering. But reality could not be delayed indefinitely. The press had gathered, rumors spread unchecked. Silence now risked more harm than truth. When the final version was approved, the room fell silent. At precisely 3 o'clock, the statement was released. Within seconds, phones vibrated across the room, notifications flashing relentlessly. Across the nation, the news spread like a collective intake of breath. In offices and homes, people stopped what they were doing, eyes fixed on screens, disbelief etched across faces. Outside the hospital, flowers appeared in quiet abundance. Candles flickered against cold stone. Churches opened their doors. Prayers whispered by strangers united in hope. William watched coverage from a small screen in Catherine's room, detached and distant. The world mourned publicly while he waited privately, clinging to the steady beat beside her bed. He reached for her hand, whispering words meant only for her, trusting that somehow, somewhere, she could hear him. The edge of loss. The hours after the announcement passed in agonizing slowness. Catherine's condition wavered unpredictably, stability arriving briefly before slipping away again. Doctors adjusted medications, recalibrated machines, and spoke in measured tones that masked their growing concern. William never left her side. He spoke to her constantly, recounting memories both grand and mundane. The day they met, the chaos of family breakfasts, the way the children laughed when she danced in the kitchen. He needed her to remember life, to remember love, to remember herself. Late in the night, alarms pierced the quiet. Staff rushed in, voices urgent, movements precise. William was gently but firmly ushered back as they worked, his heart pounding violently as he watched from the doorway. Minutes stretched endlessly before the doctor finally turned to him with a cautious nod. She was still with them, barely. Exhaustion threatened to pull William under, but fear kept him anchored. He realized then how close they were to losing everything. When the room finally settled again, he collapsed into the chair, head bowed, tears slipping freely. He had faced public scrutiny, personal loss, and unimaginable pressure, but nothing compared to this waiting. Catherine lay still, fragile yet stubbornly alive, and somewhere between despair and hope, William understood that love alone could not save her, but it might just give her something to fight for. An unexpected shift. Just before dawn, when exhaustion had dulled fear into a quiet ache, the atmosphere in Catherine's room changed. It was subtle at first, a barely perceptible shift that only seasoned clinicians seemed to notice. A nurse frowned at a monitor, checked it again, then called softly for the attending physician. William lifted his head instantly, heart seizing as movement filled the room. He braced himself for the worst, every muscle rigid. Instead, the doctor leaned closer to the bed, studying the readings with cautious concentration. Catherine's heart rate, erratic for hours, had steadied slightly. Her blood pressure showed a marginal but undeniable improvement. It wasn't recovery, it wasn't safe, but it was a movement in the right direction. The doctor turned to William, careful not to offer false hope. "Something has changed," he said quietly. "Her body is responding." William barely breathed. He had learned how fragile hope could be, how quickly it shattered. Still, the words settled into him like warmth after a long cold. Adjustments were made to medications, dosages recalculated, and interventions refined. The room hummed with renewed focus, a cautious energy replacing the heavy dread that had lingered for days. William returned to Catherine's side, taking her hand, whispering gratitude he didn't fully understand yet. Outside the window, the sky lightened gradually, pale gold seeping into gray. For the first time since her collapse, dawn did not feel like a deadline. It felt like a possibility. Catherine remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady, her body still fighting battles unseen. But somewhere deep within her, something had shifted. The edge she had been slipping toward loosened its grip, just enough to suggest that the story was not yet finished. Waiting for proof. Hope did not arrive triumphantly. It crept in cautiously, shadowed by fear and restraint. Doctors warned the family not to read too much into early improvements. Catherine remained critically ill, her recovery uncertain and fragile. William absorbed the caution silently, refusing to let optimism turn reckless. He had learned patience the hard way. The children were told only that their mother was still very sick and was being watched closely. Charlotte listened with unnerving attentiveness, asking questions no one expected her to ask. George remained quiet, his seriousness startling in someone so young. Louis clung to routine, sensing disruption without understanding it. Back at the hospital, specialists reviewed new data, conferring late into the night. The infection showed signs of slowing. Organ functions, though weakened, were stabilizing. Each update was delivered carefully, as if words themselves could cause harm. William stayed rooted beside Catherine, sleeping in short, restless intervals, waking at the slightest change in sound. He spoke to her softly, telling her about the children's drawings taped quietly to the wall, about the people praying outside, about how fiercely she was loved. Charles visited daily, his presence calm but visibly strained, offering support without intrusion. He watched William closely, recognizing the toll this vigil was taking. Still, neither man suggested stepping away. Catherine remained suspended in a narrow space between progress and collapse, and every hour felt earned rather than given. Yet, as another day passed without decline, a fragile truth emerged. Survival was no longer impossible. It was uncertain, incomplete, and perilous, but it was real, and that was enough to keep everyone standing. A breath returned. The moment Catherine stirred, no one spoke at first. It was nothing dramatic, just the faintest movement of her fingers against the sheet. William noticed instantly. He leaned forward, barely daring to breathe, afraid any sound might undo what he was seeing. Her hand twitched again, this time unmistakably. A nurse was summoned quietly, then the doctor, movements restrained but urgent. Catherine's eyelids fluttered weakly, lashes trembling as if remembering their purpose. When her eyes finally opened, confusion clouded them, her gaze unfocused and distant. William's heart fractured and reassembled all at once. "Catherine," he whispered, voice shaking. She frowned faintly, struggling against exhaustion and medication. Then her eyes shifted toward him. Recognition came slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. Her lips moved, dry and unsteady. "Well," she breathed, barely audible. The sound of his name undid him completely. Tears fell freely as he pressed his forehead to her hand, murmuring reassurances he could not organize into sentences. Medical staff moved efficiently, checking vitals, adjusting support, confirming what they hardly dared believe. Consciousness, awareness. Catherine was still terribly weak, still critically ill, but she was here. She drifted in and out, each moment of wakefulness costing her effort, yet each one was a victory. William stayed close, anchoring her with presence alone. The room, once heavy with dread, now held something else entirely. Not relief, not certainty, but the unmistakable beginning of a return. Love as an anchor. News of Catherine's consciousness spread quietly through the family, carried not with celebration, but reverence. Charles arrived soon after, emotion breaking through his restraint the moment he saw her eyes open. He took her hand carefully, as though she were made of something sacred and fragile. "We're all here," he told her softly, voice thick with relief. "You're not alone." Camilla stood nearby, tears unhidden, whispering words of encouragement that Catherine could barely respond to, but seemed to feel nonetheless. The doctors remained cautious, reminding everyone that awakening did not equal recovery. Catherine's body was still compromised, her strength dangerously limited. But her mind had returned, and with it, determination. When the children were allowed brief visits, the room filled with quiet magic. George stood solemnly, holding her hand with care beyond his years. Charlotte smiled bravely through tears, whispering how much she loved her. Louis climbed carefully onto the chair beside the bed, resting his head near her arm. Catherine summoned what strength she had to speak, her voice fragile but steady. "I love you," she told them, each word deliberate and precious. In that moment, something powerful passed between them all. Love became more than comfort. It became a purpose. As night fell again, William stood at the window, watching the city lights flicker. The fear had not vanished, nor had the road ahead shortened. But Catherine was alive, fighting, anchored to this world by the people who needed her most. And for the first time since the nightmare began, the future existed again, however uncertain its shape might be. The fragile road forward. Recovery did not arrive as dramatic transformation, but as a series of careful negotiations between Catherine's will and her weakened body. Doctors spoke openly now about timelines measured in weeks and months rather than hours, though every improvement remained conditional. Tubes were removed gradually, medications adjusted with precision, and physical therapists introduced gentle movements that exhausted her after minutes. Catherine hated how helpless she felt, how lifting her arm required concentration she once reserved for public speeches. William watched closely, pride and fear twisting together as he encouraged her without pushing too far. Some days were better than others. On good mornings, she managed faint smiles and whispered conversations. On bad ones, pain and fatigue forced her back into silence. Still, the trend held steady. Each sunrise brought a little more strength, and each night passed without crisis. Doctors described it as stabilization, but to William, it felt like reclaiming stolen ground inch by inch. The palace adjusted quietly, schedules rewritten, expectations lowered. There would be no rushed return, no performance of resilience. Catherine herself insisted on honesty. "I can't pretend this didn't happen," she told William softly one evening. "I won't survive it twice." He understood then that recovery was not just physical. It was psychological, emotional, deeply human. The woman who had always carried others was learning painfully to be carried herself. And though the journey ahead remained long and uncertain, the direction was no longer toward loss. It was toward life. The world responds. As Catherine's condition stabilized, the palace released careful updates, each one measured and respectful. The public response remained overwhelming. Cards arrived by the thousands. Flowers filled courtyards and hospital entrances alike. Messages from world leaders, charities, and ordinary families flooded in, many sharing stories of how Catherine's warmth had touched their lives in ways small and profound. William read some aloud to her during quieter moments, choosing the gentlest ones, the ones that spoke of hope rather than fear. Catherine listened, moved and humbled, struggling to reconcile the scale of love directed toward her with how small and fragile she felt inside that hospital bed. Outside, vigils continued even as urgency softened into patient waiting. The nation adjusted its breathing, no longer holding it entirely, but not exhaling fully either. Media coverage shifted in tone, replacing speculation with cautious optimism. Still, boundaries were respected. Privacy, once requested, was largely honored. The moment had transcended curiosity. It had become communal care. Charles watched this response with quiet reflection, recognizing something rare and powerful. Catherine had become more than a symbol of continuity. She was a point of emotional connection, reminding people of vulnerability beneath ceremony. As attention slowly eased, the palace made a deliberate choice. Catherine's return would be on her terms, not the world's. Recovery would not be rushed for reassurance. Healing would come first, and for once, duty would wait. Learning to rest. When Catherine was finally moved from intensive care to a quieter private ward, the change felt monumental. The constant alarms faded into softer sounds, and sunlight filled the room more generously. Still, progress remained slow. Rehabilitation demanded patience, which Catherine had never practiced before. She learned to sit up again, to stand with assistance, to take careful steps that left her breathless. Each small victory was celebrated privately, without cameras or announcements. William remained a constant presence, adjusting effortlessly to a role that required less protection and more partnership. He helped her walk, reminded her to eat, and coaxed rest when she resisted it. Sometimes frustration overwhelmed her, tears spilling without warning. "I hate this," she admitted once, voice breaking. William didn't try to fix it. He simply stayed. Doctors encouraged mental rest as much as physical healing, limiting news and external pressures. Catherine spent hours simply watching the light change, listening to her own breathing, reconnecting with her body in ways she had long ignored. Slowly, she began to understand what her collapse had been trying to tell her. Strength without rest was not strength at all. It was erosion. And though the lesson came at tremendous cost, she was determined not to waste it. A family recentered. When Catherine finally returned home, the palace felt different, quieter, softer. Life rearranged itself around her recovery rather than expecting her to adapt. The children approached her carefully at first, as though afraid she might disappear again. Over time, laughter returned in gentle bursts, cautious but real. Family meals became sacred, phones absent, schedules simplified. William noticed changes in himself too. His priorities sharpened, his patience deepened. The illusion that balance could be postponed indefinitely had been shattered. Charles visited often, no longer hiding concern behind formality, and spoke openly about slowing down himself. What had happened to Catherine had reverberated through them all. It had exposed fragility where permanence was once assumed. Though Catherine still tired easily and required ongoing care, her spirit returned steadily. She spoke thoughtfully about the future, about redefining duty in a way that allowed space for humanity. "I want to be present," she said quietly, "not just visible." William understood that this survival had altered them permanently. The road ahead would include responsibility, scrutiny, and expectation, but it would no longer be walked blindly. They had come too close to losing everything to pretend otherwise. And as the family settled into this new rhythm, one truth remained clear. Survival had not simply saved Catherine's life. It had reshaped the meaning of it. A measured return. Catherine's first steps back into public life were deliberate and restrained, guided by doctors and shaped by her own hard-earned caution. There were no grand reappearances, no sweeping gestures meant to reassure the world. Instead, she began quietly, attending small private meetings, reading briefings at her own pace, and easing herself into familiar responsibilities without surrendering her limits. William stayed close, not out of fear, but out of shared understanding. Together, they recalibrated what duty meant, learning that visibility did not require self-erasure. Catherine noticed how differently she experienced the world now, how attuned she was to her body's signals, how unafraid she felt acknowledging fatigue. The public, informed sparingly, responded with patience rather than demand. When her first official appearance was announced, anticipation spread gently rather than feverishly. On the day itself, Catherine stepped into the light with steady composure, her smile softer but no less sincere. Applause rippled through the gathered crowd, not exuberant, but deeply respectful. She spoke briefly, thanking those who had offered support, her voice calm and measured. There was no denial of what she had endured, no attempt to minimize it. Instead, she carried her experience openly, allowing vulnerability to coexist with strength. For the first time in a long while, Catherine felt fully present, grounded not in expectation, but in intention. The return was not a restoration of what had been lost. It was the beginning of something reshaped, slower perhaps, but infinitely more honest. The weight of memory. Even as life moved forward, the memory of those dark weeks lingered. Certain sounds, certain silences carried echoes that caught Catherine off guard. The faint hum of machines in a distant hallway, the sterile scent of antiseptic, the stillness of early mornings, all stirred recollections she could not fully outrun. Rather than resisting them, she learned to sit with those memories, acknowledging their place in her story. William noticed the moments when her gaze drifted, when she grew quiet, and he met them with patience rather than concern. They spoke openly now, revisiting the fear they had once avoided naming. Catherine admitted how long she had hidden her symptoms, how afraid she had been of becoming a burden. William confessed the helpless terror of waiting, of loving someone beyond the reach of action. These conversations, though painful, bound them more tightly together. They were no longer protecting each other from the truth. They were sharing it. Charles, too, carried the weight of memory, reflecting often on how close they had come to irreversible loss. He spoke candidly about mortality, about the illusion of control that power often fosters. The family's conversations shifted in tone, less guarded, more real. Though none of them wished to relive those weeks, they understood that forgetting them entirely would be its own kind of loss. The memory of survival became a quiet compass, guiding choices both wide and small. Redefining strength. Catherine's understanding of strength transformed fundamentally. It was no longer about endurance without complaint or grace under constant pressure. Strength, she realized, could also be expressed through rest, through asking for help, through stepping back without apology. She began advocating privately for conversations around health and sustainability within demanding public roles, careful not to preach, but determined to normalize honesty. Those closest to her noticed the change immediately. She listened more, spoke with greater deliberation, and allowed pauses to exist without filling them. Her presence carried a new depth, shaped by what she had faced and survived. William admired this evolution quietly, recognizing how it mirrored his own internal shift. Together, they modeled a partnership that balanced responsibility with humanity, showing their children that resilience did not mean invulnerability. Catherine made space for joy again, not the performative joy of public appearances, but the quiet kind found in shared walks, laughter over simple meals, and moments of stillness. She guarded these fiercely, understanding now how easily they could be lost. Strength, she concluded, was not about returning to who she had been before. It was about becoming someone wiser, more compassionate, and more alive to the limits that made life precious. A nation moves with her. Over time, the public narrative shifted from crisis to continuity. Catherine's recovery became less a headline and more a shared understanding, woven gently into the fabric of national life. People spoke of her with renewed affection, not because she had endured suffering, but because she had emerged from it without hardening. Her story resonated quietly, particularly with those who recognized their own struggles reflected in hers. Charitable initiatives related to health and recovery gained renewed attention, supported without fanfare. Catherine approached these causes with humility, careful not to position herself as an emblem of triumph, but as a participant in a larger conversation. The nation responded in kind, allowing her space to exist as both a public figure and a human being. There was gratitude in this mutual restraint, an unspoken agreement that some stories did not need constant retelling to retain their meaning. William observed how the relationship between the monarchy and the public subtly evolved, shaped by empathy rather than distance. It was not dramatic, but it was lasting. Catherine had reminded people of something essential, that dignity and vulnerability could coexist, and that acknowledging fragility did not diminish strength. In that recognition, a quiet bond endured. The life that continues. On an unremarkable evening months later, Catherine stood by a window at home, watching the lights of the city shimmer against the dark. William joined her without speaking, their shared silence comfortable and complete. The children's laughter echoed faintly down the corridor, grounding her in the present. She reflected on how close she had come to leaving all of this behind, how narrowly life had held on to her. Gratitude washed through her, not as an overwhelming emotion, but as a steady presence. She no longer measured time by expectations or appearances, but by moments of connection and meaning. The future remained uncertain, as all futures are, but it no longer frightened her. Survival had not granted immunity. It had granted clarity. Catherine turned from the window, meeting William's eyes, and smiled. Not the polished smile of ceremony, but the quiet one meant only for him. The story had not ended where it almost did. It had simply changed direction. And as life moved forward, imperfect, demanding, and precious, she was ready to walk it fully, aware at last of what it truly meant to be alive.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon